What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another FTN NBA live stream. We're here on a Friday. Apologize for that delay. I forgot to take the graphic off. I'm slacking. I guess maybe had a little bit too much of my adult beverage here. I'm just kidding. I just made it for this show, but we're here on a Friday, so I had to do it right. And it's March Madness, so a couple of things. Hopefully, you're all enjoying the games today. Not a whole lot of time for formalities. So we have a 12-game slate. But Adam, how you doing today?
Doing good. The last couple days I've been trying to balance following the basketball news and then all the NFL free agency news and trades and then March Madness. So it's definitely been an eventful time for sports. So I won't complain. The only thing I will complain about is no Syracuse this year for March Madness, which sucks. But what are you gonna do?
Well, hey, they suck. So what
They
are you gonna
sure do.
do? Just kidding. But like I mentioned, 12 games here. So appreciate you guys tuning in. If you are watching this on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. We're going to continue to try to do some more free shows and all that stuff on the YouTube side of things. So we appreciate your guys' support. That being said, 12 games, let's get into it. Dallas and Philly is the first game, and it is the only game that locks at 7. So I feel like we've had a lot of these scenarios recently where you can, if you're not interested in the 7 o'clock game, you can, or maybe only one or two spots, you can push off some decisions to 7:30 or maybe even later if that's what you're feeling. So first game, Dallas and Philly should be a really good real life basketball game. I'm expecting a pretty competitive game here. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously have to see if Joel Embiid plays. He's a game time decision. I feel like he will play, but obviously, if he doesn't, that changes the entire slate as well as this team, obviously. There hasn't been, as you'd expect, a massive sample size with James Harden on the floor with Embiid off the floor since he's joined the Sixers, but in that, I think it's 99 minutes almost, 36% usage, 27% assist rate, 1.65 fantasy points per minute. So, this game features two of the slowest paced teams in basketball, two very strong defensive teams. Don't have a lot of interest in Harden if Embiid's in, but if Embiid's out, then Harden becomes, he propels as one of the best plays of the slate. Tobias Harris, his usage rate climbs by over 6%, almost 7% when Embiid's off the floor, so they would obviously stand out, and Tyrese Maxey would get a bump as well. If Embiid's out, I still wouldn't go to DeAndre Jordan. He's been awful all year, and then he joined this team, and he's still been terrible. There's plenty of 3K centers on the slate that I would still prefer over DeAndre Jordan, but again, we'll see what happens. We should get this news momentarily, but I expect Embiid to play.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that he plays. He was at shoot around, and he played last game after being a game time decision, and he played 34 and a half minutes. So
Yeah,
not
don't
worried
remind
about.
me. I was hoping he didn't play against Cleveland. So
Yeah, but so I'm totally expecting him to go, and I have a couple of bets out there on some unders on some people in this game that aren't Embiid. So I'm kind of
it's
banking
gonna
on
be
him playing.
slow, man.
Yeah, it sure will, but it should be a close game. So I still think that you can see a guy like Embiid get to his value in this game. He is 10-8 now on DraftKings, so back below 11K, which is a good price for him to be at, in my opinion. And while the matchup might not be that great, and people have talked about, like you mentioned earlier, Harden's kind of welcoming here hasn't really hurt Embiid that much, really. I mean, he's dropped down from like a 38% usage at times, like at his peak down to about 36 now. And it's just killing guys like Tobias Harris, man. He's gone. He's dropped like 6-7% since the in usage rate since the trade. Obviously, you mentioned if Embiid's out, he's going to get a nice bump there, but he's pretty much just not doing anything anymore. He is 5'7" on FanDuel, and he's still going to play a ton of minutes, and he can still put up stats across the board. So I don't mind that, but anyway, we're just going to break down the 7 o'clock game, and then we're going to go position by position after that. I just wanted to touch on the 7 o'clock game because of the two big studs in this one, Luka and Embiid. So if you were considering, prioritizing one of these guys or other spend up options, how are you kind of ranking Embiid and Luka, and then anybody else at the top?
It's tough right now because like Trey Young is questionable, SGA is questionable, Ja's probably gonna play, but those players are in that spend up range. LeBron's questionable, expect him to play, but I think Durant's pretty clearly number one in my opinion at least. But between Embiid and Luka, I think I would slightly lean Luka. But like again, like this game should be pretty slow paced. Luka went crazy the first time or last time these teams played, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 79 DK points. Again, that was without James Harden. It's not going to affect It's not going to affect Luka, obviously. The only other players from this game we haven't mentioned, if Embiid's out, like I feel a lot better as about like Dwight Powell or Maxi Kleber as value centers. Both are playing strong minutes right now. Obviously, since the team traded Porzingis, and you don't have to worry about foul trouble at all if Embiid's out. So that would definitely you can still play Kleber or Powell if Embiid's in, but I'd much prefer it if he sat, obviously, so the minutes are absolutely solidified. But that's really it from this game. Like Reggie Bullock's still out, still don't have a lot of interest as usual playing anybody outside of Dallas other than Luka.
Yep. All right, cool. That game, we talked about it just because it's the first game to lock, so I just wanted to make sure we covered that game in case people are looking to prioritize people from. I do really like Embiid. I don't know if you need to have him. Obviously, you have Jokic on the slate and a couple of other really good mid-tier centers that I also like. But I think Luka and Embiid, even though they are in a slow-paced game and one with a pretty low total, I still think they are probably in the top 4 in terms of spend-up options. So definitely in play. But let's go position by position now. We'll do guard, forward, center, just because of the dual position eligibility. It's almost impossible to narrow it down to like just point guard or whatever. So starting with the guards here, and we'll break it down in terms of pricing range. So we'll say the 9K and above pricing range will be the spend up options for the position. So anybody sticking out to you at the guard position that you are looking to prioritize above 9K?
Yeah, I mean, like DeJounte Murray either reaches or flirts with a triple double every game, so he's always in play. We'll see if Trae Young's active. I think he probably will play, but we'll see. If Trae's active, I have no problem going to him. We talked about Harden. Harden's under 10K now, which I didn't even realize at first look earlier today. Then I was like, oh yeah, Harden's under 10K. Would still prefer him if Embiid's out, but the two players that really stand out to me are just above the 9K range, and it's CJ McCollum and it's Devin Booker. Devin Booker at 9,100, I think is just too cheap. I mean, we've seen his assists and his ball handling duties skyrocket in the any absence of Chris Paul since he's been with Phoenix. I just think he should be like, 90. He should be more expensive than Harden in my opinion. Like I think that's where we're at with Booker. So I like him a lot. And then I love CJ McCollum. One of my favorite plays of the slate. Made the first look article. Obviously, no Brandon Ingram still for the Pelicans. He hasn't played a massive, amount of minutes since joining this team without Ingram, but it's enough to warrant a decent sample. I believe it's 214 minutes with Ingram off the floor. CJ McCollum has a 33% usage rate and a 25% assist rate. Like he's pretty much played point guard for this team since being traded. And we saw a little spike in assists for Ingram lately. He's obviously out. Devontae Graham, I believe, is still questionable. Jose Alvarado, questionable. So against the Spurs, who are 29th against primary ball handlers, 27th against scorers, they allow the second most points per game to ball handlers out of the pick and roll, which is pretty much all McCollum's going to be doing. One of my favorite plays of the slate, CJ McCollum, but in that point guard or guard range, at just above 9K, love McCollum and love Booker.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth there with McCollum. The thing for me is like I think the ownership is actually going to be a bit low. He's not going to be like super contrarian by any means. People are still going to play him just
Yeah.
because obviously he's been super good lately. But I think it's going to be lower than probably what it would be if he was a little bit cheaper. I think it is a little bit of a sticker shock ordeal here for McCollum, who if you're taking away the names from a lot of guys, you're just looking at production and some of the rates. Like he grades out extremely well. I mean, he's 32% usage since the trade with no Ingram. Fantasy point per minute up over 1.4. So like the numbers look fantastic. You mentioned all the stuff with the assist rates. It's been very true as of late. Especially now with no Ingram. I like how you mentioned the assist rate that Ingram had. Once they traded Josh Hart, his assist rate skyrocketed, and now him off the floor as well. Like McCollum's just picking up all this work, and he's essentially the only one really handling the ball with a ton of regularity for New Orleans. So I agree. He's probably my favorite guard in this range on the board. I like him a ton. He grades out really well, and I mean, even despite the price increase, he's still the best point per dollar play in the above 9K range. Behind him is Devin Booker. So it looks like we're on the same page here with these two guys. I like Booker quite a bit. I don't know if people are going to jump on him like they have been over the last couple of weeks with no Chris Paul, but I still think he'll get some ownership. Let me check the number here. 19% on DK, 9% on FanDuel, but I agree with your point where he should probably be a bit more expensive here. So far this season with no Chris Paul and no Cam Johnson, 33% usage rate, up over 1.4 fantasy point per minute. So the numbers look really good for him too. Him and McCollum are very similar. So I find it a little difficult to pay up, that extra $1,000 or $2,000 for guys who I think have similar ceilings to guys like McCollum and Booker. Like obviously Luka is probably in a world of his own. But after that, like even DeJounte Murray, I know he has a massive ceiling, but I don't necessarily love his matchup as much as I like McCollum's. And so, I mean, I wouldn't be that surprised if McCollum and Booker like had a raw ceiling that's similar to Murray's, let alone the price benefit, right? With being, almost $2,000 cheaper. So those two guys I definitely prefer in the 9K range and above. But anybody else here that you wanted to touch on as maybe secondary options?
In the 9K range?
Yeah.
I mean, not really. Like if SGA plays, it's a brutal spot, but like we'll see if Butler's in. That obviously enhances it. And his usage has been so ridiculous that under 10K, I'd still be fine getting to him. And then, yeah, we have to see if Trae Young plays. De'Aaron Fox is in that range. He's questionable. And then obviously Donovan Mitchell's out. I'm sure we'll get to that. So, yeah, that's really it.
Yeah. Ricky says, why do I not like DeJounte's matchup? Did I say I didn't like it, or did I say I didn't like it as much as McCollum's? I thought I said
you said you didn't like it, and then you kind of paused, and then said at least not as much. I don't think you just flat out said it's a bad matchup, but I agree. Like I prefer McCollum, so I'm with you.
Yeah, that's what I was going for.
Like DeJounte's amazing. It's just like when there's a 12-game slate and there's a significant price difference. Like although we have seen lately, like there was a lot of times where DeJounte was having like triple doubles where it was like 12 assists, 12 rebounds, and like 18 to 20 points. Now he's getting like 25 to 30 points, like real points, which is even, makes him even more amazing of a fantasy player.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, no problem with the matchup for Murray at all. I just like the spot for McCollum more. I didn't mean to pause there. I meant to say I like McCollum's matchup more than Murray, and it's strictly just a pace thing. I think that the Pelicans, they play slow, so it's actually a pace up spot for Murray. I know they're going to be in the same game environment, but based on the comparison of where their pace is going, Murray's going down and McCollum's is going up. So that's why I give him the slight edge and obviously the price. But let's talk
real quick.
Real
quick, if you can just handle like point out any questions in Discord, because mine is not working right now and my phone is charging on the other side of the room. So great job by me.
Yeah, I'll be in the Discord, and I'll try to poke around in the YouTube chat as well. Cool. So if you guys are looking to get any questions answered, please throw those in either chat there, and I'll try to watch both of those. Someone said any Chris Dunn love at 3K. We'll talk about him when we get to the value guys. So I'll make sure we talk about that. But for now, let's talk about the mid tier. We'll say the 6K to 9K range on DraftKings. Any guards in that mid tier that you're liking tonight?
Yeah. So Fred VanVleet, he's been in and out of the lineup for the last week and a half, 2 weeks, but he's off the injury report. He's going to play tonight. He's 7,600 against the Lakers, who are just awful. We know that. They're terrible against point guards. They are allowing the most points per game to the position, the 5th most assists per game to the position. And I feel like the last game these teams played, which, Fred VanVleet played 40 minutes, only scored 32 fantasy points. Like, if you give me 40 minutes from Fred VanVleet, which he plays in games that are even like 15-point spreads usually, he's going to score 45 fantasy points more often than not, at least 40. And it's like now you don't even need him to score 45 or 50 because he's 7,600. So I definitely have a lot of interest in Fred VanVleet. He's not, he's guard eligible, but I view him more as a forward. But again, that's why we are doing it by guard, forward, whatever. But this is the Jalen Brown 7,500 price tag on DraftKings is the lowest price tag it's been the entire season. So I know he's been under 40 in each of his last 4. And I know Tatum's obviously the higher upside play, but 7,500 against Sacramento, it's kind of the same thing as VanVleet, right? Like, usually a very high floor player. The price is way down, and the matchup's fantastic. I know Boston could blow them out, but I think that's really interesting as well. And then Malcolm Brogdon, like, not like a priority play for me, but I will say just like anytime Brogdon and Halliburton are both active and the price difference is that large between the two, I'm just going to play Brogdon. So at 7,700 against Houston of all teams, he's really solid as well. And then that's really it from me. We're still waiting on Devontae Graham, who I wouldn't play at 6,500. We've seen a lack of a ceiling whenever he's not the only guard in town. So it's probably it for me. I mean, we'll talk. I mean, Maxey, obviously, if Embiid sits, obviously gets a massive bump too.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think that Embiid's going to play, but I agree with you. If
So do I.
Embiid does sit, that's a good name to mention there. In terms
I
of
mean, I
some
guess
guys in
Lowry
this
wouldn't be
range,
terrible if Butler's out. Lowry's been so
yeah,
cheap forever. It's just he has shown no ceiling with this team at full strength, which has been oddly the case as of late. Like Butler's been on the injury report almost every game, but he tends to play. And outside of like PJ Tucker or Caleb Martin missing a game, they've been pretty healthy.
yeah. I do have Butler projected out right now, so I think he doesn't play, but again, I don't really know. Lowry is 5,500 over on FanDuel, so a lot cheaper over
He's
there. So
always. I feel like he's been
yeah,
crazy cheap over on FanDuel all year.
yeah, FanDuel must be doing my pricing with the way that I don't like Kyle Lowry. But in terms of on DraftKings, the mid tier, you mentioned the first name that I had the most interest in. I think actually the first two names you mentioned were my top two, and it's Fred VanVleet, who might be my favorite play
Yeah.
on the slate. Like I like him a lot tonight. Like I think partially it's because he's way too cheap, but I think it's also a really good spot where even though he is cheap, he's not getting enough ownership. He'll still have mid 20s in terms of ownership. But like for a guy who's shown routinely over the last couple of years that he has a 50+ point ceiling, and now this great matchup against the Lakers, and he's under 8K, he's mid sevens, like way too cheap. No doubt about that in my mind. And then you mentioned he's been popping in and out of the lineup as of late, but even when he's out for a game and then comes back, he still played 40 minutes last game against the Lakers. I know he had a bad game, but again, like when you're talking about good tournament plays, I think it's really good to look away from that kind of stuff. Jimmy
Especially
Butler
with Van
ruled out.
Vliet too, because there's been so many stretches where he's shot the ball terribly and it's kept him in like the 32 to 35 fantasy point range. And then if you just keep playing him, especially when the price dips below 8K, and then he shoots like the one game he shot 10 of 18 and scored 50 fantasy points because he still has the assists, the rebounds are still good enough, and he's still playing 38 to 40 minutes. Like Van Vliet seems like just such an easy play at this price because he's like, even if he doesn't shoot the ball extremely well, he won't crush you at that price. Like at 40 minutes, he's not going to. And yes, LA is bad, but with the way these rotations are with Toronto, he's still going to play at worst like 36 minutes. Even if the game blows out, he probably plays 35, 36 minutes. And he's not 8K anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I know we saw the really bad blowout last game, and where Scotty Barnes had 64 points at halftime or whatever it was, and even in that game, the Lakers still brought it back a little bit, and it was still to a point where they probably could have sat down a lot of their starters at one point. I know it got to like a 13-point game at one point in time, so they ended up still getting 40 minutes. A lot of those guys did. So yeah, I'm not worried about the Van Vliet minutes at all, and obviously a really good spot in terms of the ADVP matchup. He has 3 traits, and the Lakers, I believe, are bottom 7 in all of them. So really like this spot for Van Vliet tonight. The next guy is Brogdon for me. I like him quite a bit so far since the trade. The usage and everything we've been looking at has still remained really solid, even with Halliburton on the floor. So that's a really strong boost there. Another guy who the minutes feel pretty solid. I have him for about 34 minutes tonight. And I think, again, the price is just not expensive enough. Like, I don't really understand why Halliburton's 1,300 more. Like, I know Halliburton's really good, but these guys should be like pretty much the same price, in my opinion. If I was creating the prices, I would make these guys the exact same price almost every night. And even, if I was going to make them different, I mean, I guess maybe Halliburton would be a bit more expensive because he's so reliable in terms of when he gets those, close games, he's playing monster minutes. But yeah, I love Brogdon tonight. And interesting enough, and I need to see if this is correct. Is there a 3-point spread on this game?
I earlier today when I was doing first look, I believe it was at 4. Yeah, Indy was favored by 4 this morning. I don't know what it moved to recently.
Okay. Yeah, it's off now because Eric Gordon just got ruled out, so we can touch on that as well. But um, yeah, that's interesting. I'll be curious to see what that line opens back up. I don't think like Gordon will be a big mover, but I'm just curious as to where the updated number is now. Because if this is going to be like a game that Vegas is projecting to stay close, I think that's super interesting. Yeah, last time our site updated 4 pretty much across the industry, 3.5 on MGM. So yeah, I mean, a great matchup against Houston, bottom team in defensive efficiency, top in pace. Couldn't really ask for a better spot for the Pacers, especially if this game's going to stay close. So I love Brogdon today. Him and Van Vliet, like, love these two guys here in this mid range. I think that they're way too cheap. And then looking at Brogdon's ownership, let me double check here. Got to type in his name real quick. 13% on DraftKings. That is way too low. That is absurdly low. So I love Brogdon tonight.
Yeah, I like him a lot too, and I totally agree with I love Halliburton as a player, but when both players are active, there should not be a 1,300 price discrepancy.
Yep, 100%. All right, let's talk first of all, is there anybody else in the mid tier that you like that you want to point out?
I'll add one player that's above 6K if Trae Young's out. Bogdanovich, 6,100. Not just Trae Young, but the two highest usage players on the team, Trae Young and John Collins, being out with both players off the floor. Bogdanovich has a usage rate over 28%, 1.22 fantasy points per minute. So he would obviously stand out if Trae Young gets ruled out.
Yep, I like that call. All right, let's talk the value guys. Sub 6K over on DraftKings. Obviously, there's some value guys and there's
Should we just talk Utah as a whole right now?
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, go ahead and I'll let you kick
No,
off.
I mean you have Conley and Clarkson in that same range, 58, 5,700. The thing with Mike Conley is he's gone quarters and halves taking one field goal. And I don't think that can happen now with Mitchell and Bogdanovich out for Utah. So 5,700, his rates aren't crazy or anything with both players off the floor, but they're obviously better, over a 20% usage rate, about a 20% assist rate, over a fantasy point per minute. So he obviously stands out. Clarkson, if you want to go there, has the ceiling. His minutes have been up lately. And then the value point guards, because Forrest is out, Daniel House is out, so Alexander Walker becomes interesting at I believe 3,100. So Utah obviously standing out in the slate with Mitchell and Bojan Bogdanovich out.
Yeah, I totally agree. And in the article, I wrote up that prioritizing one of these guys in a lot of your lineups is probably a core play for me. I also said I'm probably not playing any more than two. And you can set a rule for that in the optimizer where you can say if you want 1 to 2 or maybe 0 to 2. I don't want all three, but I think playing at least one of these guys, I think one of them's going to have a really big ceiling game. Which one do I think it's going to be? I think that is a tougher guess there. I think Conley is the lowest owned of the three, so I think that is already super interesting. Conley has been a better per minute player with Mitchell and Bojan off the floor this season, about 1.15, and Clarkson's just over 1, I believe. I think is at 1.05. So still both really good on a per minute basis, and obviously Clarkson is going to probably dominate more usage. And I think that you can even argue that this is a spot where Clarkson's actually going to get more minutes than Conley. Normally, it would be probably flipped in terms of thinking back over the past couple of years. And again, I think Clarkson's the better overall play, but at half the ownership, I don't mind Conley or Clarkson. So I think that could be interesting as well. Ricky says, isn't there 8 people total? I think there's 9. Yeah, I have 9 right now. So that's how I feel about it. I mean, you can get away with playing these guys, but in terms of looking for the top end ceiling game, I don't know how likely it is that all three of them at the same time have that massive ceiling game. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker is so cheap, so it makes it pretty easy to get him into lineups quite often. So yeah, that's how I feel about it. Are you okay with all three? Or are you kind of like me and you kind of want to set a rule to cap it at 2? But I like to have at least 1, no more than 2.
Yeah, I think I agree. I'd prefer 2. It's interesting with Conley too because he'd been playing barely 30 minutes for most of the season. Then there was a report that they were going to ramp up his minutes, and they barely did. They did 1 or 2 games, and now they don't really have a choice, right? If as long as this game's competitive, which I would imagine it will be, I don't see a scenario where he plays 28 minutes. So yeah, I would agree though. I'd probably cap it at 2.
Yeah, and if you guys want to play 3. I think you can make a case for it. They all project as pretty strong plays.
Yeah.
But I think that if we see Clarkson have that mega ceiling game, it's a good chance that takes away from 1 or maybe even 2 of Conley or Nickeil Alexander-Walker. So that's kind of how I'm approaching it. But all right, any other value plays at the guard spot that you like?
Someone asked about Chris Dunn earlier, so we can touch on that before we move on, I guess.
Yeah, so I have him as the 5th best point per dollar guard right now. 3K flat. I don't have him projected for a ton of points. It's 17 or 18. So I don't know if his ceiling's super massive, but I think that there's a really good shot that he maybe pops in for more minutes than a lot of people are projecting him for. Just because, I mean, when you think about it, the guys that this team is playing right now, they're not they're not good. They're not guys that are gonna like stick around for a while. So Chris Dunn can steal minutes away. I think any given night here. Especially from someone like Brandon Williams, maybe or Keon Johnson, guys like that, right? And if the game blows out, maybe he gets more run there. So definitely appealing. The one thing I do have a problem with is the ownership. I have him at about 22% right now. So what are your thoughts on him at that ownership?
I think he's fine to get to. I'll also add that kind of is independent of SGA status. You can go to, $500 or $600 more to Teo Maladon, who's locked into strong minutes right now, and that'll only enhance if SGA is rolled out. He's been scoring like 25 to 30 fantasy points the last couple games. So there are a couple options in that 3K range. We talked about Alexander Walker, Dunn, and I would add Teo Maladon to that.
Yeah, I like the Maladon call. He's also projecting as a solid value. Not quite as cheap as Dunn, but he's down there 3,600, like you mentioned. So don't mind that call at all. I haven't projected for let's see, about 19, 20 points here tonight, and definitely lower ownership than some other guys there. And obviously, this defense for Miami gets a lot worse. But one other guy I want to bring up here because normally I'm about fading him if he's going to be popular, but I don't have him getting that much ownership. Good matchup, no Jimmy Butler. Any interest in Duncan Robinson at 3,300 on DraftKings? You get the bonus for 3-pointers. I know he's not our favorite guy here at FTN, but the ownership's low and the price is down.
I mean, if you're going to play him, do it on DraftKings and hope he has a 6 of 10 game from 3.
Yep, exactly. That's how I feel about it too. And yeah, definitely a DraftKings only guy. And again, it's not a guy that I like to play when he's popular, but don't mind taking a stab on it here in this spot at that price. But let's move on to the forwards now. Actually, first of all, before we move on to the forwards, let's talk about Tyler Hero. What are your thoughts on Hero here in this spot with no Jimmy Butler tonight?
Has Butler been officially ruled out?
Yeah, he has. Yep.
Okay.
So Butler out. Caleb Martin's going to play though, who I had out. So I'll update the projections for that, and then PJ Tucker will also play.
I mean, I wouldn't like go crazy saying Tyler Hero's like an elite player or anything because Lowry's still there and they still run a lot of the backups, Vincent, Strus, a lot of those guys. But he's obviously more appealing now. Like where he's priced, is he 71, I think, on DraftKings? 72? Double check. 74, so even more than I thought. I mean, he's been great the last 2 games. There's clearly a ceiling. I have no problem if you get to him, but even with Butler out on a 12-game slate, it's not like I'm running to play Tyler Hero.
Yeah, Tyler Hero's been a guy that I've been betting a lot in the prop market and not really playing a ton in DFS because his price it's not like he's super cheap. He is projecting for about a 5x value, and he is projecting for, I'll run some updates, but sub 10% still. And I had Butler projected out before, so maybe that'll change now. But I have him for about 20 real points tonight, which might even be a bit low, but 30% usage rate so far this season with no Butler on the floor. So yeah, I don't think it's a bad spot for Hero, mainly because I think he's going to be pretty low owned. But I would much rather play Van Vliet, much rather play Brogdon. So I think that's kind of why he's going to be low owned there. But all right, anything else with the guard spot?
Nope.
All right, let's talk about these high-end forwards here, 9K and above. I think there's only 5 of them. So pretty interesting spot in terms of the lack of spend-up options at the forward spot, but I think that the quality is pretty strong. So maybe not actually we'll include Siakam in that as well. So 8,900 and above on DraftKings will be the spend-ups at forward today. So who are your favorites in this spot? Anybody that you're picking out here? And Embiid will play officially.
Yeah, I thought he would. Okay, so Kevin Durant's arguably the best play of the slate. I mean, 10-5, Portland's awful, Kyrie's not playing. Like, just, I don't really have much to add on Kevin Durant.
Sorry, real quick. Trae Young ruled out.
Okay, so should we circle back to DeLon Wright?
Yeah, let's talk these Atlanta guards, and then we'll talk about the forwards when we get there.
So with Collins and Trae Young off the floor this season, like I mentioned, Bogdanovich, we've seen him play a lot of point. Like DeLon Wright probably starts at point, but Bogdanovich will be playing a lot of point guard in this game, you would imagine. 28% usage, 1.2 fantasy points per minute. But DeLon Wright, I mean, not a ton of usage, but he's about 0.8 fantasy points per minute. He's going to play minutes. So we talked about some of the, 3K guards. I mean, DeLon Wright, he has to project ahead of everyone we mentioned, right? Like Alexander Walker, Chris Dunn, Maladon. Like he's got to project number one now.
As long as he's starting, which I think he will be.
I mean,
Yeah,
they
probably.
could not start him, right? They could go, but Collins being out kind of hurts that too because they're not going to start both centers together. You'd imagine. So it could be like Bogdanovich, Herter, Hunter, Gallo, Capella. Like they could do that.
Yeah, the only way I think they could do it is if they start Bogdan at the one, which
Right.
they haven't
Which,
really liked to start him a ton, so I'm
yeah.
not anticipating it, but that's how they would do it.
Either way, Bogdan becomes one of the better mid-range plays of the slate now.
Yeah.
In that 6K range. And DeLon Wright, in the same sentiment, becomes one of the best value plays.
Yeah. So looking in the last 2 months with no Trae Young, Bogdanovich 28% usage rate, 1.28 fantasy point per minute. It's a big boost. Kevin Herter, by the way, Bogdanovich is about 275 minutes, so still a decent sample. And then Kevin Herter, 23% usage rate, 1.16 fantasy point per minute. That's 185 minutes. So fine sample there as well. And then when you look at the year-long stuff, it's loading right now. But it's loading, and then I'll bring that back up. But so Herter, DeLon Wright, Bogdanovich, like I love Bogdanovich here. If you guys are looking to do any profits, I would rush over to see where Bogdanovich is. I'm sure it's gone by now, but that could be a really interesting spot to bet him, like to score like 25 or something like that at a nice number. But Bogdanovich I like, Herter I like, DeLon Wright I like. It's a very similar spot to the Utah guys, probably wanting at least one of these guys and no more than two again. And now it could potentially come down to a spot where I'm just going to play the lower owned option between the Atlanta guys and the Utah guys, because I think that they're all really good plays. The one spot where I think it might be a bit different is I think DeLon Wright's probably going to be just an overall better play than Alexander Walker.
If I were to play three players from either the Jazz or the Hawks, though, if I were to go three, I would probably lean Atlanta now. If I were to go three from either of these teams,
yeah, I would as well. But I mean, like, I don't know. I probably like the two Utah guys more than Herter, but I still, I mean, if we can count on those numbers I just read off, Herter sounds like a damn good play, but like he's not that much cheaper than like Clarkson. I think he's like 500 cheaper. I would rather get to Clarkson.
Yeah, I agree.
So that you can mix and match pretty easily, right?
How would you rank Bogdanovich, Clarkson, and Conley? Because I think that's really close.
Yeah, it is super close, but it would be in that order. And the only way it would change is if like one of them is like mega popular, because like I think that they're all good plays. So like I made that point with Clarkson comparing him to Conley. So like if you're looking to get contrarian, Conley's gonna have like a fourth of the ownership of Clarkson. So that's an interesting pivot, because I think again, not only would, if Conley has a big game, Clarkson probably gets hurt by that, but also I think that overall Conley's still a pretty strong play. So now I'm almost certainly not playing three guards from either of those teams, because I can just play two from one and one from the other, and kind of have a better chance of catching those ceiling games.
Yep.
All right, cool. I think that's it for the guards from this team, right? I'm guessing no interest in Lou Williams?
No.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to forwards now. Good thing that news came before we got too deep into the forwards, but LeBron, KD, Tatum, Randall, DeRozan, and Siakam are in this tier. Give us your thoughts on that tier.
Yes, like I mentioned, Durant to me is number one, and not arguably, but he is one of the best plays of the slate. 10-5 against an awful Portland team with no Kyrie. LeBron under 11K, assuming he plays, gives you that, still doesn't have point guard eligibility, but he has power forward center. He is going. Zach and I talked about this, and Joe on the NBA pod. Like, with the way this season's gone for this team, like LeBron's probably just going to go for the scoring title. He's right there for the scoring title. He's obviously had a lot of high ceiling scoring games led by that 50-point game. I think we're going to see decent peripheral LeBron still. You won't ever see him not have peripherals, but we might see like more opportunities of 40 real point LeBron. So with that being said, I still like LeBron number 2. And then probably still Tatum number 3. The matchup's just so good. I know the spread's a little bit worrisome, but I think Boston. I think he's just playing so well, and the matchup's so good. So 9K and above, I would rank them in that order: Durant, LeBron, Tatum.
All right, real quick. Chris Duarte ruled out, and Goga is likely to play. Does that change anything for you from the Pacers guards, or Yeah, just the guards real quick.
No, because I kind of expected Duarte to sit. It's a
Okay.
toe, right? He's been dealing with this toe for
Yeah,
like
toe
a week
injury.
and a
Yeah.
half now. So
Yep. I agree, but Lance is also out, correct? Did I
I
see
didn't
that?
see Lance on the injury. I think Lance, yeah, Lance isn't on the injury report.
I might just not had him getting any minutes.
He returned last game after missing 4 games. So last game was his first game back.
Okay. Okay, cool. So he'll probably get back into rotation then.
Yeah, he played 16 minutes in his first game back. So
Yeah. So I think that's probably just more of a wash. I don't think it like benefits anybody
mhm.
that we talked about. It probably just helps the bottom tier guys that we're not touching anyway. But all right. In terms of how I feel about these top end forwards, Kevin Durant's also my favorite. He's 10.5, which I think is probably too cheap for this scenario. But also when you compare him to the other guys that we're talking about in this tier, projecting as the best point per dollar option. So yeah, I like him a ton. The only issue that I have is the potential blowout. I think it's like a 13.5 point spread. So that is a problem. But I also feel that
this
if this
team,
game does blow
this
out,
team can't. They're not good enough without Kyrie to blow anybody out without Durant going off. I think.
I tend to feel the same. Yeah, I think that your last sentence is the key. I don't think that they do it unless KD has a big hand in it. So, like, even if he only plays 30 to 32 minutes, it could easily be a spot where he still goes for 60 plus because he has such a massive game. Because I do agree, like that's probably the only way that they blow anybody out is if he wills them to that, right? Which he can definitely do. But if that's the case, I still think he gets there at the price. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and when the game stays close, he's playing like 40 minutes. So I agree. I think KD's probably my favorite play up top on the slate. I mean, all these guys except for DeRozan are projecting for 5x their salary, so they're all pretty strong plays. You can make a case for all of them. My second favorite would probably be Tatum, and I would say Siakam if I didn't like Van Vliet so much. But if I'm going to be, it's a 12-game slate. I probably don't need to play 2 Raptors. I don't mind doing that, but just for comparison's sake. But Siakam's going to be lower owned than Tatum, but great spot for Tatum here against the Kings. So he'd probably be number 2 for me. Siakam 3. LeBron would be 4, but I think Julius Randle is also a really good play here, and I think he's going to be extremely low owned. So he's the guy that if I am looking through my lineup and I see I have a very chalky build, he's the guy that I'd probably consider making a pivot to in this range. He's also very cheap, 8,600 over on FanDuel, but he's been better as of late. Now 5 straight games with 20 plus real points there. And obviously he had the 36-point game against Memphis a few games back and the 46-point game against Sacramento. So it feels like he's getting a bit better here. Josh asks, Goga hurts Jalen. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't help, but it doesn't, him being in doesn't change the fact that Smith's still going to get some solid run here. We'll talk about him when we get to the mid tiers of forwards. But anybody else interest you here in the top end? I feel we covered them all.
Yeah, we can move on.
Yeah, the only one I don't have any interest in is DeRozan, and my favorite would be Durant and Tatum. But okay, let's talk about this mid tier here. We'll just go down to from below Siakam down to Bruce Brown. We'll do that way we can kind of get the big names in. Someone asked about Jalen Smith. Despite Goga being in, I still have him projected for 28 minutes. He gets a nice boost here with no Isaiah Jackson. So that I think alone is enough to bump him into reasonable contention. I think you can probably make an argument that he would still be in play even if Jackson was here. You look back, he hasn't played less than 24 minutes since February 16th, and he played 22 that game. So obviously 24 minutes isn't a singing praise, but if he's going to get 28 to 30 now with no Jackson, who's getting, anywhere from 20 to 27, really good spot for Smith. And again, matchup against Houston's fantastic. So yeah, Smith's still way too cheap in my opinion. And I think that if Jackson played, you could still make a case for him. So I'm still fine with him, even though Goga's in. I still think that just too cheap here.
Yeah, I mean, I've made cases for Jalen Smith, like you said, with Isaiah Jackson active because Isaiah Jackson fouls so much that we've been getting 24 minutes from Jalen Smith anyway, and B, he's just been so efficient pretty much all year during his time with Phoenix, but especially since joining the Pacers. I mean, you look at the last, I think, 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks, he's 1.1 fantasy points per minute, 30% rebounding rate. So I still think Jalen Smith is absolutely firmly in play. But in this range, real quick, just to repeat, because they're both guard and forward, we talked about Jalen Brown, we talked about Bogdanovich. I like them quite a bit. And then it's like Scotty Barnes is fine, but like you mentioned with Siakam, like I prefer Van Vliet, although Barnes has been fantastic. A lot of those games came starting at point guard with Van Vliet out. Um, Other than that, though, like nobody really stands out too much to me. Um, like Mobley's playing plenty of center. I don't love the matchup for him though. 7,500 feels like it's right, but he's not a priority play for me. Shocker, I know. Like I just think everybody in this rate, like Jaren Jackson Jr. has the ceiling on a given slate. He also has the potential to play 26 minutes and score 28 fantasy points. Like he's rarely a bad tournament play, but that's what he is, a tournament play on most slates. And again, this is a 12-game slate, so it's hard to prioritize him. I don't know. Who do you like in this range? Because I don't love a lot of players. I just think, like I said with the guards, it's Jalen Brown and Bogdanovich for me.
Yeah,
I do like Jalen Smith though. Like he's just not. He's still not like a core play, but he's obviously like like a guy, like still more of a tournament play. But
yeah.
if he plays 30+ minutes, we've seen him go for 40+ fantasy points.
Yeah, I mean, I like Smith quite a bit here. I mentioned I think the price is probably too cheap now here, and again, Goga's probably gonna get in there for some good minutes here. But I mean, can you even really count on Goga? Like he's projecting well because like when you do the minutes, it's kind of hard to like not have him getting minutes. But also like this guy's just been in and out of the game. Like even when he starts, it's just unbearable. So Jalen
It's a
Smith, I
foot
think, is
injury for a center too. Like
yeah.
that's like I wouldn't be surprised if he played like 12 minutes in this game. Like I think Jalen Smith's still absolutely in play.
Yep, I agree. I also like Bruce Brown quite a bit here. He's been pretty good with no Kyrie. Curry returning is going to hurt a little bit, but still definitely in play. Bogdanovich definitely my favorite play in this range here. I think he's way too cheap, and it's a good pace spot for the Hawks as well. So he's someone that I like. The last guy that I think I'd mentioned, we talked about Brown and the guard spot, so we don't need to talk about him anymore. I think he's a good play, and he's cheap on FanDuel as well. But Porzingis, like same, I've been making the same case for probably like a week now, and it looked like that last game might have been the spot where maybe he got 28 to 30 minutes. It was a blowout, so we only played 23. But if the game stays close and you want to try to find that game where Porzingis plays 30 minutes, he's going to have a ceiling because he's getting all the
Revenge.
usage. Yeah, and revenge matchup. So if this is the game that he gets 30 minutes, he's probably a really strong play. You don't need to risk it because it's a 12-game slate. But if you're building several lineups, he's a guy that I would definitely want a little bit of.
Yeah, and he's been rebounding pretty well. Other than I think that was his first. No, his second game. He only had one rebound, but 7,200. Like we could easily see a case where not a case, but a situation where Porzingis is like 8,500 in like a week and a half.
Yeah, and it's just when he gets the minutes. The price is for sure going to go up because he has a 30% usage rate and he's averaging 1.4 fantasy point per minute. Like if he keeps playing this way and just dominating all the usage, like him and Kuzma are the only people doing anything on this team. And if that's going to continue to be the case, then he's going to continue to play well. And if he gets the minutes, he's going to go up in terms of price. So yeah, I mean, like let's say we knew Porzingis was going to play 30 minutes, he's probably at least $1,000 too cheap. So that's the case there for Porzingis. But let's talk the value guys now. I guess sub 6K, not counting Smith and Brown, who we talked about in the mid tier. Who's sticking out for you?
It's got to be the Atlanta players now, right? DeAndre Hunter, Kevin Herter, both in the low 5K range over on DraftKings. I would obviously prefer Herter. He just handles the ball more. He has the ball in his hands more than Hunter, but both are firmly in play now with Trae Young and John Collins out. I mean, do you have any interest in like O'Shea Brissett? I feel like he always has these random like 12 rebound games, and it's like, oh, we wanted Jalen Smith in this spot, and it's O'Shea Brissett. But in terms of like value, there's not a ton. I mean, Royce O'Neal, you could get behind. He's going to play the minutes. He's not a high usage player with or without players on this team on the floor. But if he's playing 35 minutes, we've seen him walk into peripherals, walk into 7 rebound games. And if he's taking a few more shots, then he could be fine. And I'll also add Isaac Okoro, 3,800, playing massive minutes for Cleveland, and he's finally shooting the ball well. And that's really been the reason he hasn't been a more popular, more consistent, reliable value play. Is he's playing 37 minutes, but he's scoring like 7 real points. But the shot's been falling. He's been taking a lot more corner threes because he's had to. I mean, Karis LeVert's minutes are still limited. Jared Allen's still not there. Dean Wade's out. Rondo's out. So I think Isaac Okoro at 3,800 is perfectly fine as well. Just know that like he's not going to keep shooting this well. And I believe one of the games over his last two, he went like 11 or 13 from the line. That probably doesn't ever happen again in his career, but the minutes are there for him.
Yeah, definitely a guy that's going to get the run. Just depends on, trying to find him on that night where he does put up the stats. PJ Tucker is the guy that projects the best for me in this range, on a point per dollar scale anyway, 3,400. I mean, if you look at the numbers, he's having the best year of his career.
I think he still leads the league in 3-point percentage.
Oh, really?
So there's like 45% for like the entire first half of the season.
Yeah, I mean, like pretty much every rate that you see, assist rate, rebounding rate, usage rate, which I mean, usage rate is still not high, but it's a career high for him. Like these
What
are
is it,
these are
12?
yeah, it's like 12%. Yeah,
Is it actually?
I think it's like 12.4 or something like that. But yeah, in that range. But I mean, still, like when you think about like how these sites are pricing the guy, like a lot of it's going to come off of some of that data. So I don't want to say he's a mega value here, but with no Butler, I don't hate it. So again, like decent punt in my opinion. Probably not a guy you need to go overboard with. I think that there's plenty of guys that are a little bit more expensive that are still really strong values and project as a really strong value, but also have pretty significant ceilings as well. So that's kind of how I'm treating this particular range. Hunter, Herter, those guys that you mentioned, I think that they are firmly in play here. But anybody else that you want to touch on here in this range?
No, let's go to center and then get into some questions.
All right, cool. Break down your centers here, starting at the top. Obviously, we have a couple of big name guys. So who do you like the most up top?
Probably Jokic. He's Jokic. He's amazing. I do like Embiid though. Like Dallas has been a bottom 3 post defense for the last couple of years. They have been better this year, but obviously like you don't worry about Kleber and Dwight Powell against Joel Embiid. But I would still lean Jokic. I know Cleveland's looked at as a good defense, and they still are when they're healthy. But since towards the end of the first half of the season, right before the All-Star break, they've really fallen off. And I think Mobley's already one of the 10 best defensive players in basketball. Doesn't mean he's going to slow down Jokic. I mean, Sabonis obviously gets a bump if De'Aaron Fox is out. The individual matchup is arguably the worst in basketball, but he'd have to do a lot. And then I like Joval too. I mean, Joval's shown a little bit more of that ceiling lately with no Ingram. He's doubled in 3 of the last 4, and they've been really strong doubles. The price is up to 8,400, where it was like mid to low 7K range because he's been slumping a bit. But San Antonio, I've been targeting centers against them a lot, especially centers that are involved in the pick and roll. They're one of the worst pick and roll defenses in basketball. So I like Valanciunas quite a bit as well.
Yeah, I like the Valanciunas call. I think that if you aren't spending up for one of these top guys at center, like I think Jokic is obviously a great play. I actually prefer Embiid slightly.
That's fair.
Yeah, I mean it's not like I'm gonna say, oh, you have to play Embiid over Jokic. Like they're both amazing. They're both the best centers in the NBA. Like it's hard to really distinguish between those guys. So very good play between both of those guys. I prefer Embiid. I mean, mostly just because he's a little bit cheaper. That $700 can go a long way,
Especially on a 12-game slate.
Exactly, yeah. So I like Embiid. I have Jokic for a few more points, but I have Embiid as the better point per dollar play. But
I made a terrible mistake, by the way.
What's that?
Bam.
You just skipped over him?
Yeah.
That's okay.
I love Bam.
He's technically in the mid tier anyway, so you'll have your
8,300 with no Butler against the Thunder, who allow the most rebounds per game to centers. Yeah, sign me up. Bam over Joval, but that makes Joval a lot more interesting in tournaments because he won't be popular anyway. But if you're going down a little bit, it's like, oh, you have Bam with no Butler against the Thunder. I'll just play Bam, which it's a great play, but makes Joval even more interesting in tournaments. But yeah, Bam, Bam, Bam.
Yeah, you sound like that new Ed Sheeran song. But
is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's called Bam Bam, or something like that. Heard it on the radio the other day. Wasn't the biggest fan of it, but the name stuck in my head. But yeah, I think Bam's obviously a very strong play. We saw him. I think he played the Thunder a while back, and he destroyed them.
He has not played them this year.
And maybe I think I'm thinking of the Charlotte game actually, because I was specifically thinking of a game where it blew out, but he still scored 50 fantasy points, and he did that against Charlotte. So I think that's what it was actually. But similar color jerseys for the other team, so whatever. But all the same for Bam, still a very strong play. And again, he just adds to how deep the mid tier is if you're not paying up for Embiid or Jokic, which I tend to think it's pretty easy to do so tonight because there's plenty of value, and I like the mid tier guards quite a bit. But if you look behind those guys, you have LeBron, who's center eligible, who, when you're thinking about if you're playing Van Vliet or Siakam, pairing those guys up makes a ton of sense. And it's not like LeBron isn't a good play on his own. So LeBron, I like a lot here. I still like Embiid a little bit more. I think his ceiling is just a bit higher. But I mean, you can't really say LeBron doesn't have a ceiling. Like we've seen it a lot recently. Also really like Siakam, and then Bam. I do like your Joe Val call. I think he'll get very little ownership tonight. I have him at 7% projected ownership, and that is super appealing. But he would probably, and it's not that I think he's a bad play, but he would probably just be my leverage play in this range, just because
Sure.
you have Bam, you have Siakam, and you have all the guys up top. But let's talk the mid tier here. I know we talked about a lot of guys up top, so it might be difficult to get into this mid tier, but 8K and below or so. Who are your mid tier options?
DeAndre Ayton, 7K flat against Chicago, who have not been good against centers for a while now, stands out. I'll also add, like, Christian Wood at 7,300. That is really cheap. And I know his minutes were down the last couple games because of blowouts. That'll happen when you play for the Rockets. But like you mentioned, the spread is not that high in this game. It's like 3 points. The Pacers defense has been terrible. Their front court's obviously, even more depleted than it is already with no Isaiah Jackson. I think Christian Wood's very interesting too. And then what do you think of Gobert? Because it's not like he becomes this high usage player or anything with Mitchell out, but he's 7,400. Like, he's going to double-double, and if he gets any... Like, how I always describe Gobert is, you are getting double-digit rebounds, and you're most likely getting a double-double. What separates him from being a great play to a good play to a great play is if he has 18 to 20 plus real points with that double-double, because then it's like 50 fantasy points on top of blocks and stuff, and maybe he can take 10 to 12 shots, which is a lot for him with Mitchell and Bogdanovich out.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned he's not a high usage player, but when looking at some of the the different time frames, which is I've been looking at like last month, last 2 months, and then obviously the full season, and then the last 15 games or whatever. Over the last month, last 2 months, with those two off the floor, he has a 21% usage rate, which
It's higher
it's
than
not
I
like
thought.
massive, but yeah, it's pretty high for Gobert. When you look at over the course of the year,
It's just
19
he
and
has
a half.
he has no post up game. If he had
Yeah.
any sort of post up game, they would dump the ball to him in the post. But that's not part of his game. If it was, he'd probably be like 24% usage rate.
Yeah, for sure. So, but again, like even at 20% over the course of the year, that is a nice number for him there. So I'd like Gobert a little bit here. Again, I still prefer those guys that we mentioned up top. So probably don't get to Gobert a whole lot, but I think that's also a reason why he'll be lower owned. But some of the numbers do look really good, and I took his one of his overs over in FTN bets. Little teaser there, but yeah, in terms of Gobert, I think he's a strong play. For other mid-tier center options, kind of looking at a little bit cheaper. I had some interest in Jakob Poeltl here. I think this could be a spot where he's tasked with some more minutes, but I probably just don't really take a big stand on it, like just because of how strong of a position I think center is up top today. But let's talk some value, guys. I think that there are a couple of interesting options, and again, like some of the guys that we already talked about, you can also get some exposure to at center. Jalen Smith, who we talked about at power forward, Siakam. Those are the two that stick out to me. But in terms of cheap guys, let's talk Goga. And what are your thoughts on Goga and then any other value guys that you like?
Yeah, Goga's fine. I think he could play anywhere between 18 to 25 minutes. But I think I prefer Claxton. Like, he's been playing really strong minutes, even though he's been splitting with Andre Drummond. But he's always been an efficient player. 3,400. He played 24 minutes that game. Obviously was a blowout, but then played 26 last game. Scored just under 23 fantasy points. But like, he's taking plenty of field goal attempts in the minutes he gets. He's doing enough rebound and peripheral wise. Like, I think at 3,400, like, if you give me 25 minutes from Claxton against Portland and 25 minutes from Goga, like, it's close, but like, I think Claxton's way overlooked compared to Goga potentially. So I think Goga's fine, but I think I prefer Claxton.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not playing KD, I think Claxton's
Right.
a really interesting play because again, like then you can even use that leverage there. And if the game blows out, I think Claxton does probably smash here. And I think there's a chance that he smashes just regardless. And at 3,400, I have for about 22 minutes, which is the same minute projection as Goga. And I have Goga as a little bit better of a producer, but also like he's a lot more unreliable. So I'm a little bit worried about that. But at the same time, I think that there's plenty of reason to decide between the two. I guess I would slightly prefer Claxton as well because of the fact that I'm probably gonna be playing Jalen Smith a pretty good amount, and I'm probably going to be playing Brogdon a lot. So I don't mind playing Claxton with KD. I just say, like, I think that they're fine together, but I think that if KD does get in a spot where maybe he's losing a few minutes because of blowouts and maybe doesn't get there, Claxton, I think, definitely benefits from that scenario. So Claxton, I like a lot. I also have some interest in Drummond. I have him for the same amount of minutes as those two, but he's just the better producer and the higher usage guy out of those guys. So any
Claxton
interest in
did
Drummond?
play the last, let's see, in that massive blowout against Orlando. He did play the final 6 minutes. So if you can play Durant and hope Durant does this thing, the game blows out, and Claxton gets fourth quarter run, because he did play. It's not like he played the entire fourth quarter like some of these other players did, but he played the last 6 minutes. So like a blowout where Durant does most of the heavy lifting does not hurt Claxton.
Yeah,
Probably
for
helps
sure.
him actually.
Yep, yeah, it definitely does help him because I'll get those extra minutes there. But any other centers you want to touch on?
No, let's answer some questions before we get out of here.
Sounds good. Clarkson or Conley?
I think Clarkson has the higher ceiling.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I would also go Clarkson as well. But if you're looking for some ownership leverage there, Conley's a really good play. Pirtle or Gobert?
Gobert.
Barrett, Joval, or Jokic, Fournier?
Probably the Jokic side.
I said the first one because I don't like Fournier that much. But if
I
you
don't
can find a
either.
better option than
Yeah.
Fournier, I would probably lean
Go
that
to
side.
you can he's $100 less than Kevin Huerter if you can get the Huerter.
Yeah. Garland or McCollum on FanDuel?
McCollum.
I agree. Goga or DeLon Wright?
Did we get Atlanta's starting five yet?
I don't think it's official yet. Let me
If DeLon Wright starts, I'll go DeLon Wright.
Yeah, not seeing anything official yet, but again, I think he does start. So I would say, as of now, Wright for sure. And again, neither of those teams lock at 7. I think they lock at the same time.
It's so weird having a 12-game slate with only one game starting at 7.
Yeah. Well, DeLon Wright locks before Goga anyway, so you'll be able to make that move. But all right, let's see any other questions. Who's your favorite Hawk?
Bogdanovich.
De'Aaron Fox unlikely to play. Wow.
So now you have a situation where Davion Mitchell is still splitting a lot of minutes with DiVincenzo and Holiday. I don't even think honestly that team, obviously players get bumps, but I honestly don't even think you have to go too crazy. Terrence Davis is still out, we know that, but they still have Mitchell playing minutes. They still have DiVincenzo and Holiday. Jeremy Lamb being out definitely helps shorten the rotation, but I would still rather just play DeLon Wright and some of the other guards we talked about.
Yeah, the only thing is
DiVincenzo's not even that cheap too. He's almost $5K.
Yeah. He's not going to have any ownership though, I don't think.
No.
So that's pretty interesting if he starts. But I don't know if he's even a lock to start. Yeah, probably just playing one of those guys. But I mean, I think one of them will boost up into the 30-minute projection range.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Davion Mitchell during that stretch where Halliburton was still there and Fox was out, that Mitchell was really good. His usage rate was really high. So if he starts, I feel a lot better about him. But they can still play. They still playing, Holiday and DiVincenzo. Mitchell's, I don't know why, because he's your first round pick and you're a team that's not going anywhere. I would play as much Mitchell as you can the last 15 games or whatever of the season.
Yeah, he did play 30 last game.
That's good.
So that could be somewhat interesting. I mean,
So if Davion Mitchell and DeLon Wright both start, who would you prefer? Because I actually think I would lean Mitchell now that I talk myself into it.
I guess I would say Mitchell just because I think he's going to be a lot lower owned.
And DeLon Wright's usage has not been incredibly high with Collins and Young off the floor because Bogdan the Hawks have more players that can handle the ball in Trae Young's absence than the Kings do in Fox's absence, especially now with Halliburton no longer there.
Yeah, I mean, what this basically does for me is it kind of just takes Nickeil Alexander-Walker out of the equation.
Right.
I just don't think you need to play him now. before he was like the cheapest guy that was pretty interesting, but he was like never a guy that I thought would play like
Hmm.
even 28 minutes, right? So we did hit lock on the 7 o'clock game, but again, a lot of the stuff that we just heard about and that we're determining still is going to be for later games, so no worries there. Um, Embiid and Luka and those guys locked. But so what it does for me personally is it kind of takes Alexander Walker out of the equation, but it's going to be an ownership thing for me. And I think you're probably playing both DeLon Wright and Davion Mitchell. They're both for sure better than Goga on a
Right.
safety scale. I mean, maybe Goga has a higher ceiling because if he plays 28 minutes, he's probably going to be a really good option. But I don't feel great about that. And I'm almost certain that if both Mitchell and Wright start them, I'm almost certain they both play 30 minutes.
Yep.
All right, cool. Let's see if we have any other questions on the later games, and we'll get out of here in the next couple of minutes. I guess real quick, Sabonis, any interest now? He has 8,100 on FanDuel for the record.
Yeah, definite interest. Still, the matchup isn't great, but I would imagine his touches and usage and everything is very similar to what it was without Brogdon and Turner when he was back with the Pacers.
Yeah, I assume so as well. Trying to look at some numbers here for when since the trade when Fox has been off the floor, what that's looked like. But anybody else in the Kings that you have any sort of interest in?
Not really. Like I said, like DiVincenzo's already been kind of priced up. Harrison Barnes is always in that mid range. That is like a fine player to get to as like a last player in, but not excited about the rest of this team really.
LeBron James will start. Still no Atlanta news though. That game locks at 7:30, so I don't know. Oh, Wenya and Gabriel starting for the Lakers?
Yeah, they got to do something.
Yeah, that's interesting though. He's actually had obviously not a lot of time here, but he stood out to me because he's had a lot of pretty high usage rate since the being acquired by the Lakers, about 24%. Not that it's, I don't think you're playing him, but it's also a guy who's been about a permanent player over the course of his career. Do you have any interest there?
Not really.
I just don't even know what his minute stealing is. And now we're talking a couple of guys who
I would be more interested if they flat out just said Gabriel starting. Oh, and by the way, LeBron won't play a minute of center in this game. Then I'd be like, okay, maybe
Yeah.
like you know what I mean. But
that would be some in-depth reporting, and I don't think we're
Yeah.
getting that anytime soon. But yeah, I tend to agree there, and it would probably be a different scenario if it was a smaller slate or maybe a slate with some weaker value. But we're talking
Showdown or
some
something.
really good, or maybe like an express. I don't even know who's on the express slate or the late night slate, whatever the hell it's called. But yeah, the Lakers they're in Toronto, so it's not even like it's a late game. So I don't even know what kind of secondary slate they'd be on. But yeah, maybe showdown. But yeah, he'd probably be someone I'd be more likely to take a shot on if I didn't feel like the value is so strong in this spot here. So okay, I think we're caught up on the news. You mentioned Sabonis. I mentioned that I really like his price over on FanDuel. Let me see if they've messed with his yeah, he's still power forward eligible. So that goes a long way on this slate. I mean, he's going to play massive minutes regardless. And for some reason, the numbers for me are not loading when I'm trying to look at some splits. But again, I'll update the projections and we will I'll at the Discord when those get updated. But anything else that you wanted to touch on before we get out of here?
Go Cavs. And I need to root for LA to beat Toronto again. So it's not fun having to root for that team to win right now. Just no expectations.
Yeah, probably not feeling great there. But hey, at least you have hope. All I have is Sadiq Bey being the best player in the NBA right now. So
as of right now, like as of this moment, for the next 8 minutes or whatever till his first game starts, he's the hottest player and the best player in basketball. You got
it. You can't tell me different. No doubt about it. All right, so that's gonna do it for us. One last thing before we do get out of here, make sure you are if you're interested in the MLB package. I know we have a lot of guys who are in the MLB side who are also NBA subs. I've gotten a lot of messages about some MLB stuff, so looking forward to that season kicking off. I don't even know when opening day officially is. I know that
I don't either. I should probably get on that.
Yeah, I know they've been bumping it around and stuff, and obviously with the postponement, it was originally supposed to be the 31st of March, which would be but now I think it's the 8th. or the weekend of the 8th or whatever that 7, 8, 9 or whatever. But yeah, so we do have the early bird package going on right now. The first round did sell out at 174, I believe it was. And now the new one is up at, I think, 190. This is probably stuff that I should know, but let me double check. 199. Sorry. So 199.99 for the first 50 purchases, and that's for the whole year, and optimizers included. So I highly recommend hopping on over there before that sells out. But that's gonna do it for us. Appreciate you guys all tuning in. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton. We will see you guys next time. Until then, let me find the clip. Where is the clip? There it is. Here we go.
Let's get these beans.